This is the Business of Esports podcast.
The fastest growing entertainment phenomenon of this generation.
Hi, Prophet of Esports, joined today by my friend and co-host William Collis.
Yeah, we got the book of esports out. It's a big deal.
So everyone knows me as the Prophet and William as the Professor.
As the Prophet of Esports, I rely on trustworthy and meaningful data every day. Data from our research partner, YouGov, offers the most complete view of esports fans and gamers in the world, providing context to who they are, what they think, the brands they buy, and things they do. YouGov's connected insights and research services inform strategy at every level. If you're a team, a brand, agency, or rights holder, you should be talking with YouGov. Their partners measure and maximize ROI and are telling compelling stories with data. Visit yougov.com/gaming-esports to learn more. From the keyboard to the boardroom, this is the Business of Esports after show live stream. I am Paul Dawalibi. I'm joined today by my friends and co-hosts, Jimmy Barada, Jeff Cohen, William Collis, Jimmy Mondel, and Lindsay Poss. For those of you who are new to the live stream, what we do here is we cover all the stuff that didn't make it into the podcast. It's all the pressing news and topics from the esports world and gaming world, I should say. But the best part is we get to do it live with you guys. It's interactive. It's a lot of fun. If it's your first time here, we encourage you to participate. If you're a regular, thank you for coming back. How is everyone doing today?
Great.
Can
Guys,
you hear me right now?
Yeah.
Jeff
Oh my gosh.
has a headset. I sort
Thanks,
of don't
Commander
believe
Jeff.
it.
And Lindsay's in an art museum.
No, Lindsay,
Feels weird.
encourage this, please. Please encourage
Yeah,
this.
no, it's good.
I
It's
don't
awesome.
know.
I want to be
Jeff, thank you.
honest though. Guys, I think I have food poisoning. I feel like shit.
No, that's the worst. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Did you
But-
poison yourself?
I don't know. Whatever. I used to actually get food poisoning quite common. I think I just have weak stomach. But I'm still going to spend my evening with all of you guys. Struggle
Thank
through.
Thank you.
Hopefully not all
Appreciate
of the evening.
Um,
We're
Owen
just glad
says,
you're not pulling a Jeff.
hey, everyone, first time listening live. I normally listen to the podcast during work.
cool.
Owen, so great to have you live. Welcome. I promise this will be hopefully as much, if not more fun than the podcast.
I think it's more fun, Owen. I think you're in for a treat, to be honest with you.
Well, because you get to participate, right? So that's the beauty of this.
Exactly right.
Guys, before we jump into it, I have just a couple of things to tease for the podcast tomorrow. So, great guest coming on the podcast tomorrow, or you can expect to be on the podcast tomorrow when it drops. We had none other than AJ Damiano, who's the CEO of a company called Power Spike. They're one of the most, I would say, important influencer marketplaces out there. So they connect influencers and brands. And really interesting conversation around influencers and some of the trends there and some of the things that they do. So very interesting conversation. Definitely tune into that tomorrow. I think maybe even more fun was also just some of the topics that we covered. And let me just share that quickly here. And guys, as always, happy to jump into them here on the live stream if anyone has very strong feelings one way or another. But this was one of the topics we covered. 100 Thieves announcing a collaboration with Gucci. So that was an interesting conversation. And as a fan of Gucci, I'll just tease. I think I was a little bearish on this, which hopefully everyone finds interesting tomorrow. Robert, great to have you here. Great to see you. I don't know if anyone has thoughts on this before I tease the other story that we covered.
It's great.
But the second story that we covered
nailed the
was
coverage on the podcast. Let's say it that way. So yeah,
Right.
was Tencent blocking the merger of two properties that they own a very large stake in, Huya and Douyu. And those two companies, that Tencent was trying to merge them. The combined entity was supposed to own 80% of the live streaming market in China. and basically antitrust regulators in China blocked that merger. So Huya and Douyu will remain separate and independent, is what it looks like. So that was an interesting conversation, and yeah, so some very hardcore kind of business merger stuff, and some influencer stuff that we tied into the Gucci announcement, which I think was a lot of fun. So great conversation to expect tomorrow, guys, when the podcast drops. So definitely tune into that. Like I said, if anyone listening in the audience, watching, wants to touch on either of those topics, we're happy to go into them. Owen says, how the hell do you have these many tabs open? Owen, I will not share with you my primary.
Welcome to the live stream, Owen. This is the longest running issue we have.
Hold on, I'll terrify. Let me.
Oh my God, it's
shock.
3,000.
No, I don't want to see this. What I do want to see is Jeff put the headphones back on.
Headphones are terrible.
You guys want shock and awe?
We need to get better. Someone needs to create a pair of headphones that I like.
How about this, guys? That's the reality of how many tabs I have open.
Oh my God.
Do you use them all?
Yes, and he
There you
also
go.
refuses.
There you go. Right?
Refuses
all
to
these
use
tabs.
the tab group thingy. Terrible.
There you go.
So much anxiety.
That's insane. How do you open the tabs without clicking the X button by accident? That's the real question.
I'm very accurate with my mouse
FPS
clicks.
training. That's how we
That's
get
true.
this
Yeah,
FPS
I should have known.
training
You're like,
while it works.
Yes.
Speaking of
It's
FPS
next
training,
level aim. It's next level aim trainer right there. He's
This
like,
is Kovacs, but Office Edition.
so Paul might be competing in a tournament coming up.
Maybe.
wait, are you serious?
Yeah, for Valorant.
What tournament?
We might be on a team
We
together
might be, yeah.
going
yeah.
into a tournament.
Oh,
I want to attend this.
There
So-
may be
Where
some
is
fun
it, New
content
York?
around this.
In New York,
It'll be
yeah.
in New York, yeah.
Expect lots of Rocky style montage content.
Who do you guys
leading up
who do
to
you
it.
guys play with? Who do you play with? I'm curious.
We've got three other friends we're signed up with, so it's gonna be
Yeah, not you,
an experience.
Thick boy. Relax.
No, I meant which agent. I meant like who do you like to play as? I should
In
say.
Valorant. I don't know, Paul.
Yeah.
Who are you gonna play, man?
I mean,
Guys,
I
there's
know
only
he's
one
not. I know
choice
he's not
in
meta,
Valorant.
but I kind of like Phoenix. I'm gonna have to play someone else.
you have to play Jet. Everyone, Jet's the best. Like,
She is the
We
best.
have
That was
we
true.
have cracked 16-year-olds on our team who are gonna play Jet. I think a lot better than us.
I'm
gonna
good
be
at I'm good at the healer because I don't have
Sage.
to. I can heal. Sage, yes. Sage is great for me because I just like put the wall there. I don't need to aim to do that. Kill you, res you, and then I just kind of stay out of the fights. And if people are asking me what I'm doing, I'm like, I'm letting my abilities recharge.
She's good. We're gonna
Yeah.
get a highlight reel made of all of Paul's kills and compile them all together. We'll
I
put it to
bet.
some like music, some early 2000s rock.
Paul's gonna have
That'd
some
be
insane Odin plays. He's gonna
There
come
you
right
go.
out. It'll be like I
Oh,
can
yeah.
see it now. Flash it up, econ round, and Paul cocks the pistols going. in.
Linkin Park in the background.
Fans of the podcast
so
can definitely
numb.
expect some fun content that we are going to do around that tournament for sure.
Please, Linkin
Um,
Park Linkin Park is the must. There's like literally.
Matthew says, "Oh, and I work with Paul. It is scary sometimes how many tabs Paul has open."
Hey, man.
Thank you, Matt. I
Can we
hope
get
not to
Linkin
scare
Park
you,
to
but
sponsor this live
um,
stream. That's what I need. It's just constantly in the end looping for.
this is why I have 256 gigs of memory. It's so I can have all these tabs open. Robert says, Gucci or Ralph Lauren, which team got the best threads? Interesting question. I mean, what do you guys think? I have thoughts. Which one was the better deal?
I want to see what this 100 Thieves merch looks like, but I would, as a rule of thumb, I would probably lean into Gucci over Ralph Lauren personally. But that's
Agreed.
I mean, it's taste, right? So that's.
However, I think Ralph Lauren wins more than Gucci does, in the sense that like Ralph Lauren needed a shot in the arm of youth, and G2 brings that, whereas Gucci, I mean, sells out every collection basically these days, no matter what. They're a hot brand, and so like they don't really need 100 Thieves. It's good for their brand, but they don't. I think Ralph Lauren needed a bit of the shot in the arm, and so I think they got a good deal with G2, and I think that will pay dividends for them. but we'll see. I mean, the Gucci thing. Owen says Gucci will appeal way more to younger markets. True.
As per the recent hit Gucci Gang.
Gucci Gang, Gucci Mane. Every time I'm with playing with the 15-year-olds that carry me, like you guys are about to be carried by your younger squad. whenever we're about to push a fight, or if anything just happens, like the term is like, no, we Gucci. These kids are just saying that like they're good to go. We Gucci. So I don't think you could beat that. It's just,
Well, the only
why do
bad
they
thing
need
about
an
that is
esports activation? They just
right.
like,
Also, what if it's become so colloquial that it's unattached from the actual brand? That's what I worry about.
It has.
It's like a pure synonym for good now, like
right,
not connected to the brand at all.
I would guarantee you could we could ask 100 gamers who maybe use Gucci in their everyday language, who probably couldn't name one thing in Gucci's latest collection.
But a lot of brands have this problem. Like people are constantly saying like for Absolutely Amazing, they're like, it's so hot. Like that's so hot. Or like that's so Heroes of the Storm. Like basically like I mean I don't know. I constantly drop that. That's all I hear.
All right.
You and Paris Hilton.
That's right. That's just like
That's
you just
hot.
go on
That's what she was talking about.
Yeah, it's crazy what you see. I basically can't even wait. It was in CNN the other night. They were like, "This is a really good economic growth. It's totally Heroes." Like,
can we jump into some actual gaming news, guys? Now, let's talk about
real content.
Let's talk about gaming intersecting with other things. I have a couple of stories where gaming is intersecting with other industries, and I think they're interesting stories. And the first one here is this is from TechCrunch, and the headline is Osso VR. Osso, I think that's pronounced. Osso VR raises $27 million to turn surgery into a video game. Basically, I sort of I don't love the way it's already the article starts kind of down on VR. The author Lucas says virtual reality did not turn into the ultimate office replacement telepresence machine during the pandemic, and it wasn't for lack of trying. But some startups focused on employee training in VR have found added validation. Blah blah blah. So they're talking about Osso VR startup focused on medical training, and the idea here is that you will be able to train surgeons without having, to use corpses and other things, other real life alternatives in terms of surgical training, and that they will be able to do it all in VR. This was a big round, 27 million Series B, led by GSR Ventures, Signalfire, additional participation from Signalfire, Kaiser Permanente Ventures, Anorak Ventures, among others. So pretty interesting. They've got some corporate VCs in there like Kaiser Permanente. But we're seeing gaming, and in this case VR, intersecting with healthcare in a very real way. Anyone think this is a big trend? Anyone think this will, who disagrees with even the beginning of this article, which is, VR has sort of failed to solve the office telepresence problem?
I don't know if I disagree with that. I think if you think of a moment for VR to have a watershed that's not game driven, it was the COVID era, right? Like you had real need, and for people to have alternate solutions, to have more to have more communication and better, richer communication from at home, right? And you saw runs on people were going out and buying hardware to enable this. There were like popular camera models for, like online learning were sold out, microphones were sold out, right? Like VR did not sell out, right? There wasn't a run on the index so people could use it for, so I agree that I think VR had a moment where it was called to see if it could be, something valuable for, or at least if it was its time now to be an immersive office software, and it didn't answer, right? I think, but that does not mean at all that VR doesn't have tons of awesome applicable use cases, training being one of them. I think it's a good example. And I think this is a case where, look, like it's difficult to train doctors, right? And doctors make a lot of money. So anything that simplifies or reduces the resource cost of the training, there's probably a high willingness to pay there on the other side. I think it makes sense. I think this is sort of the thing where like there's a lot of trainings that get put into VR that I wonder about, but this one seems a bit more intuitive, particularly because people told me anecdotally that like surgeons, like amateur, like first year med students come in now way better at, basic surgery or basic surgical skills than they used to because of games, right? Like I think it's well known in the medical industry that people have better hand-eye because a lot of surgeons are coming in having game today. So I don't know. It's interesting, but it seems like there's a real synergy there.
No one? Sorry, go ahead, Jimmy.
I just wanted to add to that and kind of just add two anecdotes that I had in my life, which I think are parallel as well. As when YouTube was really on the up and up, I had a friend of mine that was in medical school, and he was working with some investors in creating a platform where they would film surgeries and put them on a shareable site like that. So to William's point, these med students that are coming in being a little bit more advanced or having that know-how. Additionally, and this isn't in medical, but a friend of mine owns about 40 fully immersive VR rigs, like those kind of like space pods that you hop into, 20 of them in LA, 20 of them in London. He has a deal with one of the history museums in Great Britain, and you can do one of those King Tut walkthroughs in Egypt. And I just, I love seeing stuff like that because it's this application of essentially what was gaming tech, but more so in history or in science. And so when I read this, I kind of disagreed with that first sentence. I mean, well, it's hard, because I know all of those VR rigs couldn't be used during COVID because of health and safety issues and because they were on loan here or there. And I think that was more a shot at the individual Oculus type units, right? But all I wanted to say with my anecdotes was I've seen really awesome integrations or overlaps or what have you in science, in history, in other areas, utilizing tech that essentially was created for gamers. And I think this is awesome. I can't wait to see where it goes in 5 years.
There's no question that the VR tech is good enough to drive some of these applications like training surgeons, right? My question is, are there psychological barriers that remain? In other words,
yes.
Would you want to be operated on? Like, let's say you had a serious surgery, right? And somehow you know that before you go in for surgery, the doctor who's operating on you, he or she trained entirely in VR, right? Has never touched
that's
right. There's
a
no
real human being.
Like I could see it now. Like, oh, don't worry. Like Dr. John is a pro. He has over 2,000 hours in Surgeon Simulator. Like he's good, Like,
Surgeon Simulator 3000.
Yeah, like you'd be a bit like, oh, like that's like a pilot flying you who's only ever flown in Microsoft, like.
Well, no, my simple view is that eventually that psychological barrier probably will disappear. Like 50 years from now, I guarantee people won't care that their surgeon only operated in VR before on them because it mentally, I think, will have been accepted. The question is, do you guys feel there's a big barrier today? Jimmy M, maybe?
I think there's a barrier for the doctors themselves, right? Because I feel like there's just a difference in what you're operating on, like the tactile nature. I don't want to go into descriptives, but there's a lot. So I think, like probably 90-10% would be great. Like that'd be a great distribution. And I, as a patient, would feel comfortable with that. Where I was like, okay, he spent 2,000 hours in Surgeon Sim 3000, and then the next, 1,000 hours doing real people, like fine, or like whatever.
But like to the flip side too, like there is a first surgery, right? Like it's not like every doctor goes into the market having done 10,000. Like there has to be a first one,
right? I
guess if it's going to be my doctor's first surgery, I prefer that they've done 1,000 hours in Surgeon Simulator than like they're just starting. Good luck.
At least with the VR, at least with the VR training, you could have a very detailed readout about your surgeon, right? Like he's time played 635 hours and like his scores, like
what clan is he in? That's all I care about.
What do you do if your surgeon doesn't have platinum trophies?
I want him. They're like,
wait, he didn't get the like sew him back up accomplishment,
right? Like what? He's missing that, doctor.
Lindsay, you were gonna say something.
Oh yeah, I was just going to say that to William's point, I don't think anyone just goes in cold on their first surgery. I'm pretty sure there's assistance for quite a bit from an experienced surgeon. So just so you know, William, if you ever have to get surgery, it's not going to be like their first rodeo all by themselves.
But my point still stands though, is I'd rather have them had the VR training in addition to everything else, right? Rather, so it doesn't have to be a substitution. It can just be another tool in a toolkit.
Yeah, and that I completely agree with. And I think even though it's fun to make fun of the analytics they could receive, we all know that any feedback a computer gives is going to be vastly more accurate than a human feedback staring at it. So, I mean, to be quite honest, I'd rather have robots doing my surgeries because the margin of error for robots there is quite slim. But if the best I can get is a robot training a human how to do my surgery, then I suppose I'd take it.
It's true. Owen says, I think VR has a lot more growth to be done. I think some say it has failed because expectations were too high at launch from marketing as well as consumer. I mean,
accessibility.
Who here thinks expectations is part of the problem with VR?
Yeah, Game Boy VR was such a letdown. I've never.
No, is it that like we were promised flying cars and this is what we got? Like, is it that kind of effect? Does anyone think expectations are actually part of the problem?
Maybe to some extent.
In the gaming world, I definitely have noticed that. I don't know how that translates here to science, but I think that's a great observation.
I definitely.
I think that.
Go for it, Lindsay. No, go.
You first.
Well, I definitely think VR was marketed as like when the first generation stuff was coming out as like, this is the watershed moment, right? Like it's ready, it's going to be immersive. And in some sense, I think maybe the displays were very good even from the beginning. But I think VR taught us there was a bigger problem to be solved than just the displays. And I think the industry made such a big wow. It is true. When you put on a VR headset, it's impressive. You definitely are like, oh, wow, this is different. Like you're ready. But the problem is there's other gaps that hold it back. And I think the marketing was disingenuous about, hey, the displays are great, but we didn't figure out how you should move. You know?
Yeah, we didn't tell you that you needed a nuclear generator in your backyard to be able to run this thing like at 10 frames a second. Sorry. Good luck.
Robert says, I've created 3D stereoscopic visualization, OR suite, and VR is important for training the surgeons on neurosurgery, for example. Wow, interesting. My surgeon would have to be ranked diamond at a minimum, says Wade. I
bet you could get a discount at gold, though.
That's true.
Yeah, you know, a lot of those guys were a lot of the gold guys were just held back by the other surgeons in their training group.
It's like, I promise, man, it wasn't me. It was my team.
Yeah.
Robert says AR headsets have overlays for surgery, such as carpal tunnel, to advise through the operation. That's cool, right? That is really cool.
That's so cool.
Robert also says developed in Unity, which is where the game architecture systems have such involved industrial and medical applications. No question, the medical applications I think are fascinating. I want to tie this to one other story here, and this was from TechCrunch, and the headline here was Power Z raises $8.3 million for its video game focused on education, and without going into too much detail on what Power Z does, it's basically it's chaptered kind of stories that you go through and you interact and there's learning around it. Mm-hmm. Who here thinks gaming has larger repercussions in healthcare versus education? Like, where is the bigger opportunity in your minds? Jimmy M?
Education in my books, because I remember, okay, I'm going to date myself here, but I grew up on, what was it called? Jumpstart. It's a program called Jumpstart for kids, right? And the Encyclopedia Britannica, that CD you would get with the maze, the museum you could navigate through. Oh my God. That was it. That was our lives. Like my sister and I, we grew up on like a really old PC, but just because there was a game, we played it and we didn't realize we were learning stuff, but we had a lot of fun playing it. And we realized years later, it was the encyclopedia we were playing, like navigating, like the mind maze, I think it was called, like back in the day. But yeah, I think the applications for education are huge because kids feel the same way. They don't realize they're learning, but they're learning a lot and they're learning quickly and in ways that I think teachers fail. But of course, teachers have their own applications, I think. But I think education as a whole is huge.
Yeah. Education is fundamental to healthcare, right? And every other avenue that you could apply this type of technology or learnings to. What I love about gaming in education so far has been particularly, and I think the success was in Commonwealth countries, Canada and the UK in particular, that I read, where these in their shell introverts were really were being more social, more confident in class, higher GPAs as a result, and allowed them to achieve academically at higher levels because of the confidence they got from the gaming that was introduced into their classroom setting. So then maybe that kid now, I don't know, goes into healthcare, becomes a doctor.
I love
Jump
the
in
thing,
one.
but I think you guys are wrong. I think the medical thing is significantly larger, and I think it's for one reason. It's the ease of adjusting to use case, right? The problem with education is to get the benefits, you also have to be a fun game, right? I think and that is a real challenge. It is a real challenge to do, and I think it makes it a lot harder to bring education into gaming than people think. For things like medical applications, I don't think it would be better if the training tools were fun, but it's actually about the simulation element. And I think that's much easier to solve. And so in the short term, at least, and by short term, I mean the next 5 to 10 years, the medical field, they're both so large, right? They're both big markets, but it's easier to solve med.
I agree with that. And I think the problem with education is that it's also a bit of a saturated market in terms of the tools that have been available. So the problem is a little bit that teachers have so many options and they're not necessarily extremely adept at using those options, I think, to further education for their students. And students have so many options that they can simply play a game that they like that maybe doesn't teach them as much either. And I'm not talking about Call of Duty versus, coolmath.com, which was my version of that. But
yeah,
I know kids that get fixated on winning a particular game without even taking the time to truly learn the content. So I think that there's an oversaturation problem and an underutility problem in education. And I think, like William said, healthcare is much more straightforward, and it's also much more data-driven or factual or kind of easy to conclude.
Yeah,
teaching surgery is a lot simpler than developing understanding of reading passages to a third grader. There's a more straightforward end goal there that I think can directly and easily benefit from game-like tools and environments. And they don't even need to take an especially gamified approach. They can actually just take a real-world approach, which is a little bit easier to codify and use. So to me, I think the more immediate benefit would be in healthcare. But that being said, I think that gaming is going to be a great way to teach kids stuff too.
I don't know if the bar is as high as you guys make it sound. Any game is kind of more fun than reading a textbook, right? The reality is it doesn't have to be wow level, amazing fun, I can't wait to get back and play it.
But is it more effective? I don't know. I don't know. I think there's I don't know. I mean, I watch a lot of YouTube videos about math because I think they're interesting because they're well made, they're entertaining, they're enjoyable. I think there's good, entertaining, educational content out there, right? I don't know, but either way, I stand by my point. Medical, it's easier. And Lindsay, excellent point. The measurability of outcome, perfect. We can't agree how to rank teachers.
I do have a question though.
Pretty sure I know how to rank.
Because
some good metrics for surgery.
It almost sounds like the medical aspect of it becomes less of a game and more of just a virtual tool in which to access these things. Whereas I think the purpose in education is to create a game, so it more feels like you're playing something and not focusing on the learning. Whereas the medical application seems to be, hey, let's remove the human element from this so you can operate on the body.
Well, they could make it a game, right? You feel like you're playing. So, hey, you didn't really kill the patient.
Operation?
You just failed the level.
I'm thinking about speed running surgeon simulator. All right, guys, we're going to go through 30 surgeries in 2 minutes.
Blindfolded. Have any of you played? Go for the comment.
No, I just want to read. Yeah, I'll come back to you, Jimmy. Owen says, I recently bought a Quest 2, and while I do enjoy it, I think the game app development isn't there yet for the consumer. It's close, but right now Beat Saber is the most recognizable title for VR. Owen, you're 100% spot on. The Quest 2, I think, is the greatest VR platform in existence right now when you consider all the factors, portability, simplicity, everything else, not just the power of the hardware. And I just think it's not enough is being done with it from a software standpoint. I think it has a lot of potential, but it's not there yet from a software standpoint. Roman says, I feel like mental health and performance psychology can be taught in games, especially competitive games. Mm-hmm. It's true.
Yeah.
That's why I like the education angle. I mean, I was gonna take it to Duolingo. If any of you have ever used that app to try and learn a foreign language, and they gamify foreign language learning, right? So again, I know we're kind of astray now from the VR debate, which got us here, but I just think the application, Jimmy's what was it? It wasn't Britannica. You said it was Encarta, right, Jimmy?
Yeah, Encarta,
Yeah.
right? Not Britannica.
So I just think the application to education, it's very easy to do. There's a low barrier, and then there's awesome examples where it's already been successful. I don't know.
Well, and to be fair, a lot of it overlaps. Like when I see mental health,
Mhm.
I don't necessarily think education or like developing psychology.
For sure.
I think healthcare, but they're very similar.
Probably a poor question, I would say. I think we can all agree on that.
Well,
Can
I
we
do.
just touch on one other aspect, sorry, Lindsay, of this Power Z story, this gaming company focused on education? Part of their whole, the way it's described in this article is basically their hope is that other developers are going to come and create content on their platform, right? Very much like a Roblox. And I think we've had this conversation, at least on the podcast or the live stream at one point, like, why is there room in the gaming universe, right? Like, why would anyone develop for Power Z when you could just as easily go create educational content on Roblox? What is there room for companies like this when you have platforms like Roblox already out there that can do education just as well, right? Like, there's nothing special, I don't think, here.
So I think, Paul, you're hitting on a key thing, which is obviously network effects. But you could make that same argument when Roblox came. Actually, I forget which is first, Roblox or Minecraft. But obviously, they're very similar. And someone could have said, well, why do we need Minecraft if we already have Roblox? Or why do we need Roblox if we already have Minecraft? And there's probably 5 or 6 other games that are fairly similar. One differentiator, I think, for this platform is if it's tailored specifically to education, you can get it into schools easier. So I imagine, teachers and school districts might have a problem with people putting Roblox in school, even though I think that is actually happening a little bit. And I'm sure Roblox is specifically focused on that opportunity, but a pure play education platform will have a lot easier time getting past those hurdles.
But don't you think, like, in some ways, the education piece might not that it's winner take all, but that it's going to be hard to be competitive because any of the existing large platforms can also do education, right? If you're developing for their platform, and it's not that hard for Roblox to do an education edition or something like that. That you can only play games that are approved for educational purposes or.
It just doesn't matter, guys. The games market comes down to the quality of the content, right? And I think it is probably easier to get quality content on larger adoption platforms because there will be more people drawn to the larger markets. So I think I think like the winners are preordained, but I think it's not for the reason we're thinking. I think it's because if I'm a content creator and I'm picking where to develop, more people are going to pick the more popular platforms because there's more money to be made. And I think ultimately it's the breadth of content that wins.
Ramsey says, I think the shortfall is marketing as well. Ramsey, I think, referring to VR here. Does anyone agree that there's a marketing shortfall?
That's actually interesting.
Jimmy M?
I definitely agree. I think there is marketing for the platforms. Like sometimes you see something about the Quest or the Oculus, whatever, on the subway somewhere else. But I don't think people put 2 and 2 together that you need this to do this. Like you need this to play Beat Saber. You know what I mean? I think people know what Beat Saber is. I don't think people know how to get to that Beat Saber part of the VR game. I think there's a very large question for the majority of consumers.
I mean, I'm curious where Ramsey thinks the shortfall, where you think, Ramsey, the shortfall is from a marketing standpoint. Like what's being left out from a communication standpoint to the consumer?
I've actually seen, I hate to contradict or to go against you, Ramses. I've seen some really cool marketing, but more in the social media sense, where I've watched really cool VR clips of creators doing things. It just, for me, for whatever reason, isn't enough to justify like doing that, getting the equipment and doing it too.
But I bet you those are promoted to you because you've bought a VR.
Sure.
Right. Like I actually sort of agree. I think Ramsey, I think about how many ads you see for PlayStation games versus PlayStation consoles, right? Like I do agree with you that probably maybe it's because the VR market still feels the need to educate and like explain what the thing is. But like how many ads did you see? Let's go to the biggest VR game release I was going to. How many TV ads did you see for Half-Life Alyx?
I think 0.
That's just odd to me that possibly the biggest game ever for VR had 0 TV ad. That's an interesting point. I think it might be that probably game developers today for VR are focused more on the cutting edge, and they're not thinking about the marketing of they're like trusting for the platforms to be a true distribution mechanism for them. And it's that could be a reason for VR's slow growth.
Yeah, I'll just read Ramsey's response here. He says, I see the shortfall both on the actual hardware, Quest, etc., and for VR games. Let's say on Twitch I get 1 out of 10 ads for the Quest and none for the games, and I buy lots of Quest games. Yeah. I think it's true. There may be a shortfall there where they just can't spend on marketing also, right? Like there's not a lot of huge studios making VR games with big budgets and
not a lot of VR exclusivity. That's the other weird things. Like even Half-Life Alyx was not exclusive to the Index, you know? Like there does seem to be this weird thing where you would expect the reason to market the game and why that's effective is if it's only available on your platform. But because VR as an industry seems to have sort of shied away from aggressive platform exclusivity, right? I think it also hampers the ability of the marketing. Because if I run a great commercial for Half-Life Alyx, the people who have the most incentive to promote today are the platform owners because they still need to drive adoption. And if I run a killer commercial for Alyx, that helps everyone too, right? So there does seem to be a bit of a catch-22 going on in how VR has chosen to structure its content right now.
So that fits into what I was actually going to say earlier is as we've been having this discussion, I've been trying to pick apart the problem with why adoption isn't happening. And I think I've sort of formulated a mini hypothesis. And I think when it comes down to it, there's a whole lot of reasons adoption isn't happening. Marketing is a big one. Accessibility is a big one. But if we're being real, like things are fairly accessible, especially to a lot of people in the pandemic, saving money. Anyways, I don't necessarily know. It's hard to get to like what Jeff was talking about with network effects. It's hard to get to a tipping point when people want to go out and buy this. And there's a lot of reasons for that. But I do wonder if going back to the healthcare debate, if putting VR in more training environments and work environments and more technical environments would make it so that people are more inclined to then bring that technology home. The same way I was thinking about cell phones and car phones in the 90s and how it started out with kind of the uber wealthy or the higher ups in business and then sort of worked its way through. And as it worked its way through, the technology got a lot more accessible and a lot more colloquial. Like people talked about it and people were interested in having pagers in the 90s. And it started off with, doctors and lawyers had pagers and then all of a sudden everyone had pagers until that technology obviously went out. But I wonder if focusing on developing VR for more technical aspects and job training programs, similar to how the military does it or healthcare, any of these other things, would have a better sort of trickle-down effect in terms of getting people to actually adopt it in their home lives and see it for its entertainment value than trying to force the entertainment value and people still don't feel comfortable with what it is.
I mean, Lindsay, could you then, like, I like this hypothesis. Could you then conclude that maybe it makes more sense for the makers of VR hardware not to try and get more budget friendly, but to stay super high end, appeal only to the uber wealthy with like a crazy immersive, experience that they can brag about on Instagram, and it's maybe a $5,000 setup instead of a $300 headset? Like, is that
$5,000 setup for a medical school is cheap change too. I think it would be a way to improve and innovate on the technology while still making money and having a real world impact that could eventually get to an en masse place. I mean, it's hard to just wake up and create something that everyone wants to have in their homes. So in thinking about why this isn't in everyone's homes and why it didn't have a watershed moment during the pandemic, the real answer is there's a million little reasons. So in order to get over that hump, I don't, and this is without any data or any evidence or anything like that, but it's my inclination to believe, like, sell this stuff to the people that can pay for it and make it really, really good so that the people who pay for it want to use it and can use it, and then it'll eventually maybe work its way down. Again, like, this is all conjecture, so I'm not sold on that, but just a thought.
I just want to read Robert's comment here. Robert says, the problem with gamification in education is it is either badly created / supported and not updated enough, or they are just boring. There's definitely potential for gamification the metaverse, though, how do you think the virtual environments in, for example, geography and history could be more interactive and engaging in a game?
Yo.
I mean, this is one of those things that where I don't even think it has to be fun, right? Like, meaning, if I have a great VR application that allows my student to go walk around the pyramids, right? It doesn't have to be fun.
It's awesome.
It's literally just better than looking at a picture in a textbook. Like, this is why I think the bar is relatively low for educated. Like,
I think Encarta is a good example of that. It was literally like textbook passages with random photos and like backgrounds of places in the world that you would go, or like random pictures, and you just sit there and be like reading and be like, wow, that's cool, and just keep clicking through, you know, and just be like, whoa. Maybe that was just what we did, but I think I agree with your point. The bar is low. Anything that's cooler than sitting in a classroom and listening to your teacher, honestly. Like,
and to Robert's point, there's huge potential for gamification and virtual environments, no question. I don't know if anyone feels differently, but
my question is how would you monetize this? You know what I mean? Like, I think obviously you could sell the program. You could clearly monetize just from the headset, but most of these games have some sort of in-game spend or gamification loop to keep people around. Like, just wandering around the pyramids isn't really going to make a ton of money relative to what I imagine you would need. Like, in order to create what you're talking about, you basically need to create Google Earth, but somehow make it like living that I can walk around. I imagine that's incredibly expensive. Like, I don't know how you'd have to figure out a really good monetization hook in order to sort of justify spending that R&D.
I mean, education has always historically been kind of a terrible customer, right? Schools never have enough money. And you know, spending on things like tech is never top of the priority list. So I think, Jeff, your point's a good one, that monetization with anything gaming targeted at education is going to be a tougher path. I mean, even you see companies that are doing education, like gaming for educational purposes, like the Playverses of the world. Like, all of these companies struggle to monetize, because anytime you walk into a school and you say, pay me X, there's 6 layers of bureaucracy and approvals. First of all, there's, you know, very tight budgets. I think if I come back to the original argument of like gaming having a bigger impact on medicine or education first, even though I love the education argument for a million reasons, I just think medical is just such a better customer, right? And a much higher willingness to pay, if no other reason. Owen says developers haven't given a concrete reason why to buy it. It's not necessarily a killer gaming device, though it can be. It's not marketed as a killer media viewing device either, which it's not yet, Owen. I like, you can watch Netflix on your Quest, but like, why? Right? When everyone has when everyone has like a 70-inch TV that's like perfectly good for watching Netflix. If there was some way you could interact with the Netflix, that'd be cool, right?
What's that thing? What is it? Magic Leap? What are your thoughts on that? Like the mixed augmented reality type thing. You're muted, William.
Oh, I think that's an easy take. We haven't solved VR yet, and AR is a lot harder to solve. So call me when VR is mass adopted.
I would disagree with that one. I would say AR is much easier, right? Like, we see AR a lot currently, right? Like, Pokemon Go was a massive AR success.
Yeah,
maybe not what Magic Leap was promising in terms of what their AR is, but
I think
AR is like a lot.
I guess that's fair. I think what Jimmy's talking about is the really, like, Magic Leap's the truly high end AR.
Yes, yeah,
right?
that has not
is basically VR without the headset, right?
I agree with that.
Can I ask a bigger question? And this is a total tangent here, but we're all about tangents on this live stream.
Do it.
If VR is truly Ready Player One caliber or holodeck caliber, why would we ever need AR? Like, why? What's it for?
So you don't have to put on a headset?
You're going to have to put something on.
Some people want to live in the real world still, man.
But if the virtual world is so compelling and indistinguishable from the real world, which is what I'm talking about here, and the tech's so good, why do you need AR?
I think that's the wrong definition, right?
To enhance.
different
Yeah.
audiences with different interests and needs.
I just don't think
Paul's
there's any
right.
future for AR.
I think Paul's
Is
right.
AR the
actually.
stepping stone though?
No.
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 I mean, the future of AR that I like is what was dropped by Robert, right? Where he was talking about like having it's kind of like a heads-up display for our military to have and see how much ammo is in their clip, or our surgeons to have to, and why not add a little music play bar there while I'm at it, right? Like that's
Oh,
the
yeah,
AR
yeah,
that I
that's
want.
true.
That's the AR world I want to live in.
The
I want to have
Apple AR,
music.
But
Apple
can I
AR
just
with
make-
the fitness tracker, everything.
Yeah.
Can I just make the point though? Like if VR is so good, right, that I can create an entirely new reality that your brain is completely fooled by, right? Why do I need to overlay everything on top of a real image when I can overlay on top of a virtual image? And the soldier point is a good one. And because I was toyed with this idea in my head of like, part of the challenge of being a soldier is fear, right? Imagine instead of a heads-up display, you literally have a VR headset that's taking the real world, right? You have a true virtual version of the real world, but all the enemies are all of a sudden like clowns or right like
You're gonna perform some intensive head.
but meaning like, you
there's a
can
good-
solve the AR problems with really good VR. I think you
There-
can do that same surgery with a virtual reality headset. Your hands are still operating in the real world, but it's a purely, completely like computer generated image.
And there's a good analogy here, which is like we don't do Photoshop on physical images. Like you can do it, right? Like I can go get a sticker and an eraser, but like the reality is it's much easier when you want to do a high degree of manipulation and content injection. It's much easier to just work with a virtual file. So to some extent, the more you want to do with AR and the better AR gets, the more it's probably better done in a VR situation, Because at a certain point, if you think of like taking AR to the logical extension, like, wouldn't it be VR? Like, think of everything you would want to layer into your perfect AR simulator for a surgery, right? Magnifying lenses, music playlist, vein highlighting, multiple X-ray, infrared, and just write out this wish list and look at how much of the image that you're actually seeing in the end is real world imagery versus post-processing imagery, right? Like, I don't know. I think Paul actually makes a really interesting point. I think it's subtle, but I think you might be right.
Let me just get caught up on some comments, guys. Jeff, sorry, is it quick?
Well, I was just going to say, real quick, if our reality becomes this virtual reality, you could still have an augmented version of that virtual reality. So you're walking around in the metaverse and you have the heads-up display. Like, is that considered augmented reality or virtual reality? Or are we just talking semantics now?
Right. I think as soon as you pipe in as soon as you're using your own eyes to see anything that's not computer generated, it's AR.
Right? And I think that's going to be the biggest distinguishing factor, right? For applications like real world things, like Jimmy was saying, like in the army or in practice in the real world. I think that's I think Robert was saying that in the comments as well. I think that's going to be the key distinguishing factor moving forward. Are you using your eyes, or are you going to actually have to look through something? And I think that will just end up being the split road.
So I'm confused real quick on the clown comment, like having your enemies as clowns. Are we gonna have soldiers that are like in a base in San Diego wearing headsets with robots, kind of like in Ready Player One, right? That
Iron Man,
bro, for sure,
right?
For sure.
So hey China, like don't send your actual army to this place. Let's just hash it out on the West Coast server,
Jimmy,
and then we'll play another round.
I'll take it one step further.
Yeah.
I guarantee you, we're gonna have military gig, like a military gig kind of service. So the same way some people finish their jobs and come home and drive Uber to make a few extra bucks, right? Yep. People will come home, they'll put a headset on, and they'll be doing
drones.
some mission in some country halfway across the world.
Yeah.
That sounds awful.
I mean, they're already flying drones miles away, right? Like that's kind of how I get that. So I guess what I would say is VR requires a lot more infrastructure and coordinated support, right? Whereas AR, I just think the lifespan where we are currently, you could probably hop into AR, apply it in a number of different ways for a very long period of time to just enhance the way of life that we're already accustomed to and using. And whether or not VR even gets adapted or we get to that point, I just think that's I don't know, much further in the future.
Jimmy, I want to.
Yeah.
Oh,
Sorry, guys. I'm like way behind on comments. I just want to catch up, and then we'll. Ramsey says, "Great point, Lindsay. I was recently doing a project where car manufacturers were looking at VR AR to be used by designers and technicians to reduce the cost of design build." Yeah, I mean, it's these kinds of applications that I think make sense. I like, Lindsay, your hypothesis. I really do. Owen says Apple is coming out with their mixed reality headset that will be high priced. Maybe Apple is going the luxury route. I mean, if anyone can sell a super luxury, mixed reality kind of device, it's going to be Apple. And maybe that's the big breakthrough you need, right? You need the support of a company like Apple. Ramsey says, and showcase to customers using the same tech. Yeah. Check out extreme snowboarding on VR YouTube. We'll have to check that out. Robert says AR augments the real, e.g. we use wayfinding digital signage for mobile that shows your path. AR is B2C, most opportunity is B2B, where VR rules for content. That's interesting, breaking it out as one is a B2C opportunity and the other's B2B. I'm trying to think, I don't know if that holds up completely, but it's an interesting way of splitting the two technologies. Trent says the best example of reality where VR is preferred is The Congress by Ari Folman, though that story is super dystopian. Well, I guess, that is one path that goes there. Like if VR gets good enough, there is that, or isn't it the end of WALL-E where everyone's just kind of sitting in the chair?
That's what I always think.
Yeah, that's what I always think of too.
That is maybe as dystopian as it gets with like really good VR. Sorry, I read that one. Trent says LSD versus mixed reality / VR. LSD? Like actual?
It gives you an augmented reality, right?
Why not?
Of some sort.
That's an altered reality, not augmented reality. Robert says, can we talk about mixed reality and extended reality too? Robert, this is a rabbit hole. I think we've gone down this rabbit.
Why don't we cover the difference between MMO and metaverse? We haven't really touched on that yet this podcast.
Greg says, you guys are awesome. Greg, you're awesome. Thank you for being here. It's great to see you again. All right, let's move on, guys. I think we've hashed this out enough. Can we talk about how it's incredible how quickly Paul is right about things? I think this is just it's
a weekly
uncanny.
segment.
It's a weekly segment, but this one's hilarious. The headline here: Cooler Master and D-Box Technologies, who, by the way, I think I even mentioned by name on the last live stream, literally by name, are coming out with a $2,000 gaming chair. It says you might want to have a seat when you see the price tag for the new gaming chair being released by Cooler Master and D-Box. Basically, it's a $2,000 chair. I don't know if this will work, but I don't think you'll get the audio even if I turned it on. But it's this very cool $2,000 chair for the base model and $2,300 for what they call the Motion 1 version. It's going to use technology from movie theaters and amusement parks to create that fully immersive experience. How funny is it that 1 week later, guys, 1 week, it took 1 week for me to be right here. How long till we see a $5,000 chair?
I guess
Who here wants this one
weeks.
instead of the BMW one?
No, I want the BMW one. I want the AI in the seat. Where's the AI?
This one is not smart.
I want the one I can expense.
True. The $2,000 one then, Jimmy. It'll be okay. Anyone have thoughts on high-tech chair proliferation that we didn't cover last week?
I don't think we have enough ultra luxury in games. I've said this before. I think we can support way higher price points. I think 2,000 is low. I actually am not,
I agree, William.
I think 2,000 is low. I'm not even
and
kidding.
look at the brands too, right?
I think you will be stunned. Particularly when it's such a core ingredient of your gaming experience. Like your chair is so important to how you play, to how long you can play. Like, I don't know.
To be clear, I think this is cheap. like that D-Box add-on, which is only $300 here, like it's $2,300. A D-Box motion platform, if you're doing like a sim rig, like you're really into sim racing and you're doing a sim rig with D-Box. D-Box is like the high end of like what I would call the mainstream sim rig segment. It's like the top of the top in that mainstream. Just the motion platform can be like $2,000.
Oh.
So like
Wow.
this to me is an impressive price point to have hit.
Yeah, I think we're going to see much more expensive chairs, especially like this is Cooler Master and D-Box, right? Like Cooler Master is a great company. They make great products. I think there are other also great companies that will make better products, probably more expensive. I think they're just waiting for their opening. Like Corsair is going to come in with like a $5,000 chair. I feel like Corsair and like Audi or something. Like who knows? They've already shown so many automotive brands have already shown interest in the space through investing in esports and so many things. Like it's only a matter of time.
Are we going to see like a what do you call it? Like where you have this war of a one-upsmanship on gaming chairs? Like is there going to be this?
I think you're more going to find the market will race up until you find there will be a peak price point. My guess is it's probably going to be around $10,000 for ultra luxury. Like that's typically price point you see in sort of other adoption markets, right? I mean, I'm just throwing it out there. And at that point, there will be a couple very high profile providers with $10,000 offerings that are trying to distinguish themselves by features, but are mainly distinguishing themselves by marketing. Because at that stage, all the meaningful features are built in. So it's effectively a luxury item.
Jimmy?
I was just to say, I mean, yeah, I want that Gucci collab on my BMW chair, and that'll get me to 10K for sure.
I was gonna say, I thought you were gonna say we have to reach out to Cooler Master because we need to make these chairs the official chair or something of the,
Oh my God, yes.
of the live stream or something.
Yeah,
like
you
that,
should
right?
get each of us one of these, Paul.
Yeah.
Six,
And every time
I'm fine with
$10,000
that.
chairs.
we rumble.
I'm okay with it.
The bass in the intro rumbles. The chairs are all just sitting
And
here.
only if I control the motion of all the chairs, right?
I'd say Paul gets a button where he can
Can
push
turn
us
them
back
around
if we
voice
say
style.
something
He launches Jeff out of the podcast.
Dance puppets.
Yeah.
Owen says Paul has already pre-ordered for sure. I have already emailed Cooler Master. Yes.
Shots.
And Trent says the TSM X Logitech X Herman Miller cash grab. I mean, Trent, these are good chairs though. The Herman Millers are worth every penny, literally worth every penny. They could double the price, and I still think they'd be worth every penny. If you sit in one for a long period of time, it really, really makes a difference. It's the one place where I don't think it's a cash grab. Like, truly don't think it's a cash grab. All right, let's. This was kind of a silly one. Let's move on to something more serious. Let's talk about ninjas in pajamas. Like actually ninjas in pajamas, not the gaming, not the esports org. No, I'm just kidding. The esports org.
I was like, what?
Esports powerhouse, Ninjas in Pajamas, agrees to merge with Chinese team. And so Ninjas in Pajamas, which is based in Sweden, very well-known esports team, they've merged with a team called ESV5. I've not heard of this team. And they stream on it's an esports team, and they're merging with this counterpart to form a new entity which will be listed in the US. They're saying by year end, which is pretty soon. If it's going to be listed on NASDAQ, they're saying it'll be the first esports team in the US, and the combined revenue will be about $61 million for 2021. Neither party commented, so I don't know how true this rumor is, but it seems like it's coming from reputable sources. I guess my question for you guys is this a path we're going to see where a lot of esports teams needing liquidity are going to see public markets as a serious option, but to get there, they need scale, and so you're going to see a ton of consolidation. Like, it's weird to me to see Ninjas in Pajamas, which is, top tier esports org.
It used to be, at least.
Yeah, merge with, at least I have never heard of them. I'm not saying I'm up to speed on every esports org in China, but like I had never heard of this org. Is this just sort of a way to get scale to go public? Like, what is the play here?
I mean, am I allowed to say I called this? There's almost zero incentive in the team market not to be aggregating, because scale is like there's nothing to stop scale aggregation from reducing costs and driving revenues. And in fact, there's every incentive. Literally read the book of esports. Like, I don't think it's anything to do with getting to the public markets. I think this is just like, why not? You have teams with sim teams in North America, some teams in China. I think what you're going to discover is this Chinese team is a lot bigger than we realize. We're just not up on all the Chinese pro teams because there's regional differentiation. Just like I can't tell you the biggest, sports teams in China, right? I can't tell you the biggest esports teams in China. They put this together. It's a bigger org with more reach. You know what I mean? They did it.
Yeah.
And I think the flight to the public market is a nice bonus.
Question for you. What's the scale? The scale makes perfect sense to me if you're in the same physical location, right? You can share facilities, share, a chef or whatever these esports teams have. But if one's in China and one's in Sweden, I don't necessarily see as much like cost savings or synergy. I mean, I guess where am I missing?
Well, I think it's sorry, go ahead.
No, you did, Jimmy. You did.
I was just going to say, like, I think it's opportunity to reach an entirely new market, and NIP specifically, like Ninjas and Pajamas, used to be huge world championship level teams, super reputable, but in the past 5 years haven't done anything anywhere in any game. And so maybe it's a way for them to keep the brand alive, at some point, like, hey, we have a powerful brand, semi-powerful, let's merge with this team. Maybe it gives them access to our audience, which is massive, but kind of waning, and still revitalizes our brand. The thing that what I'm most curious about is naming rights and the rest. Like, how is it going to go for NIP in the future? Is this the end of one of the most legacy teams in esports, or what? Like, what does this mean for the future of the space?
So just to be clear, NIP has teams. Historically, Counter-Strike was their biggest. It's what they're most famous for. They have teams in Valorant, Rainbow Six, and FIFA. Okay, well, ESV5 competes in League of Legends and Honor of Kings. So there's no overlap in the teams that they field.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sort of not buying the reasons beyond we need scale to go public and we need to go public to get to access capital.
I'm
sorry, go ahead.
Well, I mean, like let's go over like all the benefits of adding scale, right? So now I have a larger audience, which I can sell my sponsorships and my merchandise and however else I have my revenue drivers to, right? I have incremental audience across language. So now I can take a game where I was only exposing, say, in English language or in Western markets, and now I can add equivalent exposure in Asian markets, right? I can cross-sell programs. So now I can have, whereas before I could only do North American sponsorship or European sponsorship, now I can do a global sponsor. So there's huge synergies on the revenue side, right? And on the cost side, like, let's say I'm ESV5 or whatever there, and I'm not in Valorant, right? Do I need to start a Valorant team? It's a relevant game, probably, right? Like, so in certain sense, it's eliminating costs through deduplication. Again, I mean, like, I can keep going, but read the book. Like, I'm
That's
serious.
more of an opportunity cost than a actual cost.
It's still cost deduplication, right? Like, eliminating an opportunity cost is still eliminating a cost. Like, that's why it has cost in it. It's not just opportunity, right?
I think
bam! Econ 101.
You just got juiced.
The juice. I just drank the juice.
I think it might make sense on paper, but I just disagree that those synergies in sponsorship, for example, really overlap that much. The Chinese audience is not worth what an American audience is to the right sponsor. I took this. I have mixed reviews here because I felt this way for a long time, and I took this type of issue, deal, what have you, to a few different tier 1 orgs, and they all rejected it for the same reason, and that's that their sponsors didn't care about an audience overseas that they couldn't sell to, right? So in essence, yes, maybe Coca-Cola on a global level might have an interest in multiple different areas, but the sponsor that you're talking to that sponsors your North American team under the Coca-Cola umbrella is very different than the Coca-Cola that sponsors a Chinese team under that Coca-Cola umbrella. So, again, mixed reviews because I love tapping into, I love esports becoming global. I love teams becoming global and having presences across different markets. But I think they're so segregated that in name they might be one thing, but in practice, again, the audiences are so different. The sponsors are so different. So again, mixed reviews for me. I don't really see a lot of value here, just because I've had personal failures with it.
It sort of fits though the narrative of like Ninjas has not really done much in the last few years. This may be truly, not desperation's too strong of a word, but it's like, hey, we need to do something. You know, we're maybe tapped out from our, you know, investor base. What can we do? Well, going public is sexy. Lots of opportunity there. And they may have seen this as an obvious path. It's a good story, I think. It's a good NASDAQ public market story. Better than it is, I think, a good business decision.
I really hope that this isn't the first esports team that goes public, because that'll just be another disappointing esports public company. There's so many better ones.
Like
no,
Astralis,
I know that, I guess there's Astralis and
but in the
one
US,
in Canada
none,
that just got
right?
bought, but no one on the US exchange. So I hope that the first one is one that really has something to bring to the table. Not to, you know, slander Ninjas in Pajamas, but it like we all kind of agreed, it's a little bit of a tired brand and maybe a little bit more nostalgic than really popular currently. And then you add a Chinese brand. Like, to me, it just has the recipe of like a deal that people will get somewhat excited for, and then very quickly, like, the buzz will fade and it'll be another disappointing esports listing, which we don't need right now.
And I think if they do manage to go public, like, I actually do think they can probably make this work, right? Because if they have access to sufficient enough capital through their public, you know, vehicle, no reason why Ninjas in Pajamas couldn't go buy other esports orgs in the US, right? And there's more synergy. There's more obvious, I think, synergy there and cost savings there. So I don't know.
Yeah, right. Maybe they turn them into a winning team for once. Like,
yeah, true. Sign great players.
Don't get me wrong. I'm bullish on an esports team going public. I just think
right.
better if it was one that
has some sort of draw already.
Yeah.
Like, you want to see 100 Thieves or FaZe or...
I think 100 Thieves would do really well being public.
Yeah.
Incredibly well.
Yeah. I want to go back to, is anyone interested in the $61 million revenue number? Because that is pretty
That's
interesting.
combined, right, William?
Yeah, combined. But everyone is sort of saying, oh, like, esports teams don't earn money. And I think no one is holding up Ninjas in Pajamas as like the ultimate, you know, like, you know, value. And you know, I don't know what ESV5 is bringing to the table, but I'm looking at that 61 million. I'm like, hey, that's a business. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
it's a great point.
I think it might be time for us to rethink some of the expectations around teams' ability to generate revenues. And I think as we see more things, like I think, look, I think Astralis Group has some interesting financials. I think I forget the other ones that are public, but I think, like, as you look into them, like, the revenue numbers are more interesting than you would think, right?
Trent says, Miskiff mentioned on stream that Tips and he have suggested they're taking OTK public. That's interesting. It's not like, at that point, what are they taking public? It's literally more just like a stream team, right? Like, it's not a...
Right,
they're not competing, right? I don't think OTK competes in any games. I don't think they own any franchise spots. I'd be curious if they could take literally just an aggregation of streamers and influencers public. Trent says EEG and Game are already public tickers. Don't they both own teams?
Technically, yeah, right?
EEG does not. Game... Didn't GameSquare buy...
Does
GameSquare
Oxygen?
Didn't they buy the assets of
They didn't buy Oxygen
Reciprocity?
in that deal? They bought, or Game just bought some, what's the one in tech? The Jerry Jones.
Complexity.
Oh, Complexity, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, isn't that technically the first public on the NASDAQ, right? Isn't
Canada. They're in
Yeah.
Canada.
Oh, Canada, okay.
Oh,
Well, you could argue Enthusiast was the first because they own Luminosity, and their NASDAQ, when they went, they uplisted to NASDAQ.
It's funny, the amount of time, like, so when I first started looking at Enthusiast, probably almost 2 years ago at this point, like, a big part of their investor story was that they own these teams. And it's amazing to see when you look at their deck now, you have to like literally try to find them talking about that. And I think they do a good job. Like when Adrian was on the podcast, I think he did a good job explaining why they own those teams and how they view them as like building communities. But it's funny that it's not really a big part of their investor story. And I think to their credit, I think it makes sense what they're doing. Oh, game is Engine Media. I didn't realize that. Engine Media, do they own teams?
I don't think they own teams. Torque doesn't field any teams, do they?
I'm not familiar with Engine Media.
I don't think
They just went
field a team.
They just went on to NASDAQ, I think last week or something.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
wow.
another Toronto-based company. Robert says, "Why go public when you can sell your name to a crypto exchange for $210 million?" Robert, that's
Robert,
that's
you're
one of the
winning.
smartest comments today.
Yeah,
That's so true.
Yeah, that's extremely true.
Why all the headaches of a public listing and public reporting and public governance and all these kinds of headaches when you just go rename yourself to TSM FTX? I'm surprised we haven't seen, on this note, guys, interesting. I'm surprised we haven't seen more naming deals coming fast and furious.
It probably is. It's just delayed because I think there was a fear of if it's acceptable or not. And now that I think there are two in market, because wasn't there one that got out a little bit
The
before?
General, NRG.
Yeah,
And Dignitas Quantum Pay.
Yeah,
that's
like
true. That's true.
Yeah, good one, Jimmy. Like I think it's just like the floodgates are opening and just the first ones have come out and it's only been like 2 weeks. I'm like, where are all of them? I think they're all getting inked now,
All right, guys, let's move on. Let's talk about let's change gears here. Let's talk about Allied Esports, because since we're on this sort of public markets topic,
Jeff.
Pour one out for those.
pour one out for Jeff's trade on Allied.
It was a good trade.
Tell us.
They're trading for less than the cash value. I mean, this is a
Do you want
decidedly
to introduce
negative.
the story, Jeff?
I don't necessarily want to introduce the story, but they're currently this is a negative story for the esports space if you think about it. They're trading currently for less than the cash value on their balance sheet, which means that the public market is currently valuing the esports assets of Allied Esports at negative $25 million.
Okay, so let's just give some background here. So Allied Esports, public company, had two major sort of assets. One was World Poker Tour. The other was their Allied Esports assets, like the big stadium they've got in Las Vegas. And they sold the World Poker Tour assets. That's what this article's about. They completed the sale of the World Poker Tour asset to Element Partners, which is a private equity group. They sold it for $105 million, which means they received $105 million in cash. And today, what's interesting is two things. One, the company is trading at, I believe, like an $85 million market cap. Jeff, correct me if I'm wrong.
It was like 81 by the end of the day, I think.
81 million. And the CEO resigned today. So Frank stepped down as CEO of Allied. Any thoughts here on why, there's an obvious thought here, which is it's just a timing issue, right? Like the sale just closed. At some point, the stock goes up and recognizes that there's 105 million of cash in this business, and therefore it should trade at around 105 million market cap. Does anyone think this is just a timing issue, or is the market really punishing the value of these esports assets? Jeff,
I want to drink the juice.
I think the market is punishing the value of the esports assets, and I think the market is to some extent getting it right because these esports assets are burning a lot of cash. So that 105 million, I imagine they're burning. I don't want to say a number because I'll be wrong, but they're burning a decent amount. So I want to say it's upwards of 10 million a year. So if they can't offload these assets, which I know they are currently going through a process of trying to do that, that 105 million will then become 95 million or less. So the market is not necessarily wrong here. Now I know that what Allied is trying to do is they're trying to basically become like a SPAC again, and their chairman Lyle Berman, is a serial entrepreneur, wealthy guy, and I think that's his plan, is to basically take that 105 million and deploy it elsewhere, not within esports. So the esports assets are a little bit of like an orphaned child right now, where they're not really part of the, like, I wouldn't be surprised if they changed their name from Allied Esports to something like Something Acquisition Corp in the next few weeks. I'm not even joking. I think that they actually will, because I don't think they have any intention of operating the esports business, over the medium term. So we'll see what they do with those assets, but I don't think it's part of their go forward plan.
I mean, who's a buyer here for these assets? I mean, the stadium's named HyperX, right? HyperX is now owned by HP. Would HP go pick up that stadium and the esports assets, given that
they have one already, right? I mean, do they need another?
No, this is they're paying for the naming rights of this stadium.
This is for the Pyramid in Vegas, right?
Correct.
The Luxor,
right. This is that stadium's owned by Allied Esports. HyperX pays for the naming rights.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Right?
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Instead of paying for the name right, why not just buy the asset if there's a fire sale opportunity here? Why not HyperX be, way more vertically integrated than just an accessories maker? Does it make any sense? Like, I don't know. Who do these esports assets go to, Jeff?
I don't know. Yeah, it's a tough one. Like, I don't know exactly who the buyer is. They kind of, they put this high value production studio in Las Vegas, and I think it's become a little bit of a white elephant project where they spent $25 or $30 million building it, and it just kind of can't really support that. And I think there's a decent rent on the property as well. So it's not just the sunk cost. There is an operating cost aspect of it that I'm not sure you can really cover. They do have some esports trucks that are pretty cool. I don't know if you guys have seen those. They you can send them to different events. So I think there's some value there. But it's not clear. I don't think they've really built much of a brand within the esports space that I think there's a lot of people that are clamoring, to go out and acquire them. There's some good people that work there. Like, I know Judd is their CEO. Like, I think he's pretty well respected in the space, but it's not clear who the obvious buyer is.
So you don't think we ever see Allied Esports trading at its cash value
once they get rid of the esports assets?
It's a little weird to think about that. Can we just switch to a slightly related topic, in that this also involves a stadium? But this is Riot in the news, and the headline here is Riot Games brings back in-person event for North American League of Legends Championship. And this article is obviously about Riot announcing for League that their North American Championship is going to be held in person end of August at the Prudential Center in New Jersey. And it's going to be obviously an in-person event. I don't think there's any limits on how many people they're going to put in the stadium. They will pack it. And this is going to be a big return for Riot in North America, obviously, for in-person events. Is anyone surprised? It's kind of a silly question, but this is what stood out to me, and maybe you guys have other thoughts on this story. Anyone surprised that they would pick the Prudential Center in New Jersey for their big, comeback championship? Why New Jersey? And why the Prudential Center in New Jersey? Right? Everyone likes to say the LA is sort of the bigger hub for esports. Why here?
I think you've been to Newark. It's a hell of a city.
I think genuinely the East Coast is starved for content and tournaments and all the rest. And I think they did a really great job having Worlds at Madison Square Garden when they did a couple years ago. I don't know why they wouldn't do it here again. I'm assuming it has something to do with cost, but I don't know. Maybe they're just trying not to repeat venues, but that doesn't work because they do the Staples Center in LA all the time. So I don't know. Why not MSG? I have no idea.
So add DJ Khaled. It's a hit.
No, please, God. I'm trying to forget that. Please. It was so bad.
No one thinks they'll bring back DJ Khaled. No one wants who here wants to see DJ Khaled come back for some more esports events?
I think they should double down. I
Bro.
think like it could be a meme. It could be like every year. It could be like and DJ Khaled. Like,
That would
and
be
of course,
the
no way.
best.
They'd be like, no.
Like I think they should own it and just go all in like every year, announcing a 10-year collaboration.
With DJ Khaled providing all the soundtracks for Modern Warfare 5.
Relevant, hype.
Is the bigger takeaway here that in person is back for esports? Like if Riot's doing a big event end of August, that officially this marks the return. William, I don't know if you had thoughts.
Yeah, I
there.
mean, if Riot's doing it, it's a really good signal, right? Like they have the most to lose, I think, about rushing back to in person early, right? It's a very strong, and more to the point, now other people will look and say, well, Riot's doing it. Maybe we can do it too. I think it's a strong bellwether for sure. Them by itself is not sufficient because I think they will have, my guess is they're going to have strictures and requirements and everything to make this extra safe. Like, I don't think it's going to be 100% just like 3 years ago, but I think it's a really good sign for the market.
Also, I mean, like look at the NBA Finals right now. Look, I had a friend that just went to a Garth Brooks concert in Vegas. I'm not surprised by the live event as much as I am, or as much as I want to discuss why Prudential, New Jersey, right? But to William's point, I think if Riot's going to do it, others will follow.
Is it the Dignitas connection? Is it the right? I don't know, Jeff, if you have thoughts there or
Why they did it at the Prudential Center?
Yeah. I mean, Dignitas
it
has an
certainly
LCS
could
team,
be,
right?
And Dignitas is owned by Harris Blitzer, which is who of course owns the Prudential Center. So, yeah, I think it would be naive not to assume that there was some, connection there, or, makes perfect sense. And it's a good building. I mean, it's the right size. It's 15.
Just to be clear, 19,500 seats,
God
not 7,000 seats. All right, Toronto.
Yeah, you don't need to host the
19,500.
LCS. You can host Overwatch League. And then you could comfortably have you could have everyone have an extra leg room.
Right.
That's fired. Overwatch League just got juiced. John says, could be scheduling conflicts at venues with all the events coming back. That's an interesting one. Maybe this wasn't their first choice.
They were like, New Jersey, man.
No, that's a really good point. That's a really good point. And maybe then the connection to Dignitas makes sense because they could get into the schedule,
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about, guys, the ESA report that came out. It came out I think this was what came out, a day ago or 2 days ago, Lindsay? I think you had sent me this. And it had an interesting statistic, but one in particular that stood out, and this article's from GamesBeat, that the US gained 13 million gamers during the pandemic. And I thought, I saw that stat, and who here thinks that this is possible? This is just the US, right? Like, we're talking about, 5% of the population became a gamer during the pandemic, like an additional 5%. Does anyone not feel like this 13 million number is high?
That sounds like an influx of Switch users at the beginning of the pandemic.
You think so?
To be completely honest, yeah. Like, that's when Animal Crossing was just picking up hype. Like, the first months of the pandemic was huge for the Switch. And so I genuinely believe like a huge chunk of those are probably Switch players. And then, the rest from everything else.
Yeah. Also, Paul, that's less than 1% too.
Is it?
Because the population, the U.S. population is 330-ish, right?
328.
So it'd be like 3%, right?
That's what I'm looking at. Yep.
Something like that. It's still a lot, right? And if you're talking about just the age group of potential gamers also, right? That's a big chunk of new people coming into gaming. I wonder who here thinks that this held up globally. Like, do you think China added 3% of their population in additional like people gaming.
In
You're
India,
talking about
right?
big numbers
Yeah,
at that point.
mobile. Yeah.
And the other thing, the other fact that came out of this, which I thought was interesting, this ESA report is very much U.S. focused, obviously, because this is primarily where they operate. But the average video game player in their report was 31, not 25, not 18, not 16,
Yeah,
31.
That was what I found the most interesting, actually. And I think it really signifies that the group who grew up with gaming is now reaching their mid 30s ish, is what I was thinking.
I mean, I don't know. I still don't understand how 100% of people don't play games. I think they're the greatest things. I'm serious. I think they're the greatest things ever. I think people who don't play games just haven't had the right experience to get them into games yet, right? I think not playing games is like, nobody says I don't read books, or like, oh, I don't watch
Exactly.
movies. Like, it's crazy to me. And I totally buy that in a pandemic situation, when you are stuck in, like, you're telling me there's not some, 42-year-old who's stuck at home with his or her screaming kids, who looks at their mobile phone at night and is like, okay, I'll check out what this Clash Royale thing is. I totally buy that we could have it. I don't think this was hardcore users. I don't think these were people like, this wasn't cyberpunk driven, but I think that's how it starts. I think it's a migration up market, and I totally buy that this happened.
We got to try and guess what the definition of gamer is for this study, and unfortunately it's not YouGov, so we can't take out, we don't know everything about it.
Although I know we covered it even on a past live stream, and I think it was on their website at one point, that YouGov had done quite a bit of analysis and data gathering around gaming habits during the pandemic. And so obviously plug here for a great supporter of our live stream, which is YouGov, but go check out yougov.com/gaming-esports because they have a ton. I know they collected a ton of data around gaming habits during the pandemic, way more than this ESA report had in terms of granularity of the data, in terms of how deep it goes. And so, like, if anyone's looking to do research or is looking for actionable data around sort of the effect of the pandemic on gaming, reach out to the folks at YouGov. Ben Parrow, for example, if you go find them on LinkedIn, or Nicole Pike, or some of the people we've had from YouGov on the podcast. They have incredibly detailed data around the pandemic's effect on gaming and on all parts of gaming, right? So mobile, PC, console, etc. So go check them out. yougov.com/gaming-esports. They're tremendous supporters of the live stream and of Business of Esports in general. And I know if you guys are looking for stuff like that, they have a lot of it. John says, with all the video cards coming on the market from China, more gamers coming. I mean, this is a win-win, John. If there's more video cards coming, I think everyone's going to be happy, including not just gamers. People can't buy cars these days because of the video card shortage. Ramsey says every current gamer's significant other. There could be some truth in that, Ramsey.
No, that was
a
legitimate point. Like, my wife picked up the Switch over the pandemic. I wasn't even thinking about that, but she started playing Animal Crossing. To Jimmy's point, she was like, "Oh,
I just wanted to add to since William and I are kind of complimenting each other right now. I just wanted to add, episode 116 of the podcast, which I just had to look up. We had the GM, or I should say, you guys had the GM of gaming for Logitech, as well as their director of strategy. And one of the points they made in that episode, which I remember back when I was the biggest fanboy of the show, which I still am, but one of the points they made was, when they talk about Logitech's innovation and they go to their own kids, their own children for input, and I think, I can't remember which guest it was, but he said, I went to my daughter and I said, are you a gamer? She goes, yeah, I'm a television watcher. I'm an eater, like, up to William's point, I'm a reader. Like, it's not. So again, the definition of gamer is kind of weird for the younger generation. And I'm only making this point to say it doesn't surprise me that conversion happened at the older end of the spectrum, because William's wife, my fiance, both picked up Switches during the pandemic and started playing Animal Crossing.
Yeah, I'll say one thing that, like, I don't know, this is really anecdotal, but it's one of those things that always stays with you in your life, and I'll share it. I know it's kind of the same effect with people it had with me, but I remember in Harvard Business School, there's one point where they're doing some class about marketing or user adoption, and they showed a TV piece from, like, I forget even when, like, it wasn't even that long ago. It was like the 1980s or something, and they have some guy talking on it. And the subtitle for that guy, like the reason why he's qualified to be on the news sharing his thoughts is he says owns a computer, right? Like, and the whole point of this, to teach you is, like, guys, like, things start small. Like, now today, like, like, everyone owns it. Like, are you kidding me? So that's always stayed with me, is like, wow, like, it does start with one person, and it is novel when the first user does it. And I don't know, same for gaming, guys. I really believe that.
But then don't we maybe lose the cool factor of it all? Like, doesn't it come full circle, right? Being a gamer was not cool. Now the label goes away because everyone's a gamer, right? And doesn't the label going away sort of make it not cool anymore, right? Like, it's so cool that it's not cool anymore.
Now it's like rock and roll. Everyone played rock and roll, but not everybody was Aerosmith, right? Like, not everybody was Jimi Hendrix. And now you've got these huge mega teams doing crazy things in rock and roll that everyone wants to be like, but they just don't know how to get there now. Like, they're all trying.
What will happen, Paul, is you'll end up like those insufferable film snobs who are like, oh, like Francois Truffaut is the only I only watch black and white. Like, that will be you. You'll be like, what are these kids? I only play.
Thresh was the last great pro gamer. We reached the pinnacle there.
Paul already is that for film too, by the way.
They don't even, let me tell you, in my day, I had to put the mouse over the head to get a kill.
Yeah. Yes, the game wasn't aiming for me. Cough, cough, controller players. John says it's not a question for everyone of if you are a gamer. It's a question of what games do you play. Yes, John, you're exactly right. It's what games. This is also why I love doing, what are we playing now on the live stream, because I think it's fascinating. In some ways, this becomes almost a defining characteristic of people, right? Is what games they're playing. It's like, what brands do you wear, or what, TV shows do you watch? It's not defines a person, but it's another dimension of a person.
Right. What culture are you invested in, basically?
Yeah.
If you're a Valorant player, you're in that ecosystem. If you're an Overwatch player, you're in that ecosystem, like 100%.
Exactly. All right, guys. I think that's, I had one last article. I don't know if you guys want to cover this, but it was, we can touch on it quickly and then wrap up. But it was about Drakestar Partners, which is an investment bank run by a guy named Michael Metzger. He's a well-known analyst in the space, and they did sort of a report on game deals in the first half of 2021. And there's not a huge amount of discussion here. I just thought some of the data was really incredible. So the headline here was game deals surpassed $60 billion in the first half, just the first half of 2021, just 6 months. And if you look at M&A transactions in the first half, you have Microsoft ZeniMax, you have ByteDance, and Jesus, I'm going blind.
Where's Genji Analytics? They're missing a big acquisition here.
You have EA and Glue, you have Embracer Gearbox, right? Like, you have all these massive acquisitions, HP and HyperX. I was surprised at I hadn't thought, sort of stopped to think, 169 mergers and acquisitions just in the first half of 2021, $23 billion in deal value. Okay. If you look at private investments, there were 364 minority financings from VCs and strategic investors to the tune of $4.8 billion. And if you look at public markets, 37 announced and closed IPOs with $11.2 billion in proceeds. Again, this is all just in the first 6 months of 2021. I don't know if you guys have thoughts on this, on the size, on the number of, I'm just blown away by both the sheer volume of deals and the size of the deals and the size of the dollars involved. Anyone think this is going to slow down second half 2021 or, first half of next year?
I'll go. Well, Number one, I
and
think
Ramsey, to Ramsey's question, I'll link this one right now. I'm sorry, Ramsey, I should make a better habit of linking every article that we cover. Going forward, I think what I'll do is, Ramsey asked, have you linked all these articles anywhere, Paul? I think going forward, what we'll do is we'll include links to all the articles in the description of the YouTube VOD after the fact. So we'll add the links to the YouTube VOD description after the fact, Ramsey, if that's helpful. Sorry, Jeff, go ahead.
I was just going to sort of answer your question. I mean, clearly, number one, it's been a great time to be a gaming company. The pandemic, obviously, everyone sort of that listens to this knows this, brought out a lot of new demand. We obviously just literally talked about it with the last story. Having said that, I do think you probably will see a slowdown with the pandemic igniting so much interest in gaming. All the public gaming companies' stocks did really well, which tends to lead to acquisitions, more M&A, more IPOs because valuations are really hot. We are likely to see that abate a little bit in terms of there probably will be, and you're already starting to see it a little bit the last couple months, like the stocks of all the video game companies have taken a little bit of a cooling off period. So I do think you're likely to see this really hot activity slow down to some extent. But long term, medium term, obviously, it's a great time to be investing in gaming.
I'd also just point out there's like a limited number of big acquisition targets left. Like there's only so many Bethesdas out there, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I do think we're going to see a lot of these guys snapped up because it makes sense. Partly for why Jeff outlined, and partly just because I think they'd stayed independent for too long. There were other business reasons, but there's a finite number of those good deals to do, and I think a lot of the good ones already got done, to be honest.
So what's the total size you guys think of activity we're going to see second half of the year, if you're including M&A, private transactions, and public, like IPOs?
I'll say 40 billion to bring us to 100 billion for the year.
You think it's like $100 billion year in terms of total
it's
activity?
Gonna be a huge year, but the bigger stuff got done earlier in the gate would be my gut. It's still going to be a big second half, but it's going to slow down a tiny bit.
Interesting. Jeff, I'm curious to get your thoughts where you think this plays out.
I liked William's answer. I think that was, we're obviously kind of guessing here, but there were some chunky deals in the beginning of the year, so I think I would agree with that. It will slow unless you get a big, caveat would be, like Amazon or Netflix, to bring in a story, just hired a new gaming executive, and we've been talking about Netflix getting deeper into games. Do they go out and buy Activision or EA or something like that? Obviously, that then takes the number significantly higher. So
I'm handing you the juice. Why aren't you drinking it? Like
you just got juiced.
Great point.
We're gonna need a graphic, a special effect. Don't worry, Jeff. We're gonna hook you up here. All right, guys.
I do want to say I'm excited that Cherry was doing so well. As a huge hardware fan, I'm excited that the mechanical keyboard space is doing well. I'm excited they're doing well, especially in light of all the new Switch competitors that have come out, like Razer, Logitech. They're all making their own Switches, but Cherry prevails because it is overall quality and consistency, and they've delivered that product. So I think it's huge for the space.
Did they get bought?
I don't think they got bought, but I saw it on the publicly traded one all the way at the bottom that they were doing pretty well from the looks of that graph.
Oh yeah, you're right. They did go public. Yeah, I actually didn't even know that.
Me neither.
Cherry went public and they raised $430 million, and their IPO valuation was $828 million. This is a company that makes Switches. Exactly.
That's what I'm saying. That's exciting for me. Like, that's exciting.
That's a cool pickup. Interesting. Yeah, that one's an interesting one. But what's interesting is their enterprise value, the multiple of, they're trading at 6 times revenue, which is not insane, right? In the gaming conversation.
Don't need Switches in VR, Paul.
But it's also assuming quite a bit of growth, right? Like in Switches. They're expecting
they're
people
just
to
the
sell
manufacturer.
Yeah, and so they manufacture like the switch of the keyboard, like the actual actuating point of the keyboard, and then partner with like companies
not Nintendo
Switches.
Switches.
Right. Just
this
like
Switch This red thing here.
Yeah.
They
I
make
thought you
that.
meant they literally make Nintendo like they manufacture the Switch, and I was like, that
No.
interesting.
Yeah.
Like they were
No,
like an
keyboard.
external manufacturer for Nintendo.
Mm-hmm.
Keyboard switches. That means they're planning on selling. The markets believe we're going to sell a lot of gaming keyboards.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
On that note, guys, that wraps up. I don't know where Lindsay went. That wraps up this week's. There she is. Can't end without her. That wraps up this week's live stream, guys. Thank you for coming. Thank you for commenting. Jimmy, Lindsay, Jeff, William, all of you guys. Thank you so much. Don't forget, guys. We do this every Wednesday evening, 8:30 p.m. Eastern time. We really appreciate everyone coming by, participating, lurking, doesn't matter. Tell your friends about it. It's more fun with more people here. And don't forget to follow us everywhere, like on YouTube. If you're watching this on YouTube, subscribe to us on YouTube. Follow us on socials. Go show YouGov some love. Follow them on their socials. Reach out to them if you have any data needs around the gaming and esports industry. They are extremely supportive of the Business of Esports live stream. And so if anyone has that need, definitely go talk to the folks at YouGov. And as always, guys, stay tuned for the podcast tomorrow. It's a great episode. And we will see you guys next week. Take care.